Hey, this is Tom Matthews from Return of the Living Dead as Freddy, and you're listening to Don't Go Out There podcast. Take care.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. Just want to thank all our fans and listeners. I really appreciate all the support. Before jumping into tonight's legendary blood donor pick, just want to give a shout out to our website, don'tgoouthere.com. We've got everything on our website you need to know about this podcast. We got all of our social media links, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Go follow us there. You know, we love interacting with our fans, growing this podcast, and we do that by interacting with y'all. We also have all of our episodes, our interviews, our blog, our store. All the good stuff is on our website. And tonight's a blood donor pick. We have a Patreon. It's called Blood Donors. We have the traditional reoccurring kind, $5, $10 a month. We do a lot of giveaways, so I think it's really worth it. We get a lot of fans who ask how they can support us. So we created that, and with y'all's help, we really make a good product, a good podcast. And we also have like one-time donations. Like tonight, if you want to come on our show, you want to pick a movie, we have that option available. Tonight is one of our biggest fans, Joe Larson. She's a legendary blood donor for a second time. And Joe, why don't you go ahead and announce your pick for us?
So, all right. If you guys heard my first time on this show, I told you that my mom is the reason that we're so into horror movies. My sister's here with me, Kasey, by the way. So we picked the Return of the Living Dead because it was our mom's favorite horror movie. Mom passed away 2 Christmases ago, so I just thought it'd be a cool way to honor her in her true horror movie fashion.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll go next, Brian, real quick. Never seen this movie until, Joe picked it. We've had to reschedule it a couple times, so I've had to rewatch it just to refresh my mind. I think the movie is just okay, honestly. I mean, I have no nostalgia or no attachment to it. It's an 80s super cheesy movie, but it's got a lot of Friday the 13th alum in it. Some big names in horror like Linnea Quigley. Been in Silent Night, Deadly Night. Would love to get her on the show one day, maybe. I'll try. Maybe we can make that happen. Maybe me and Brian can make it happen. Miguel Nunez Jr., Demon, them damn enchiladas. And, of course, friend of the show, Tom Matthews. It's got a lot of familiar faces, but I don't know. It's just kind of cheesy, but sometimes cheesy is good. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, so this is definitely an interesting one. In just a little history, obviously this only exists because of the Night of the Living Dead being the original, and apparently Romero and John Russo made an agreement that they wanted to make a sequel, but wanted to make separate projects. So, it's a very unique to see a franchise go this route. Romero agreed that he would drop Living Dead from the title of his sequels, hence the ones we got like Day of the Dead, so on and so forth. We definitely took a different route here. Russo struggled to get it off the ground, I assume, due to its different nature of it. Toby Hooper was even connected to the project at one point. And speaking of Hooper, I mean, I think this definitely goes the same route that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 route, and that whole black comedy route. And I think you either love it or you hate it. But regardless, it launches, friend of the show Tom Matthew, don'tgoouthere.com, his legendary career, and an even weirder sequel. So as I've established, as I've established, I love the running, the talking, the thinking zombies. Well, I love the running zombies anyway. But here we are, and I'm ready to get into it.
All righty. Any more opening thoughts before we jump into it? All right, let's do it. All right, the film starts with text on screen, July 3rd, 1984, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at a medical supply-like warehouse. Bert is heading out, and Frank is going to show Freddy the ropes. Frank says he'll see Bert at the barbecue. Frank shows Freddy around, and they pack up a skeleton into a wooden crate. The skeletons come from India. Back to walking through the warehouse, we see dogs for veterinarians, and now we're in a freezer. Frank says we need more inventory of bodies. Freddy looks a bit spooked as Frank jokes around. Now we see a group of teens walking down the street and they want to party. Tina says he got a job. Speaking of Freddie, and Kasey says let's go pick up Freddie because he always knows where to party. Freddie asks Frank what's the weirdest thing he saw in here. He asks Freddie if he's seen Night of the Living Dead and says that's based on a real case. Freddie doesn't believe it. There was a chemical spill at a VA hospital in Pittsburgh. It caused the people in the morgue to jump around as if they were alive. It was a spray for marijuana developed for the Army. The Army shipped all the contaminated dirt out and kept it a secret. The bodies got shipped to where they work, and not where they're supposed to go. Freddie is visibly shaken and has asked if he wants to see the bodies in the basement. They head down there. Frank shows Freddie the bodies in these barrels. Frank smacks the barrel, and smoke comes out of it. The two men pass out, and we get a title card and opening credits to a groovy score. Love the score of this movie. We see the body thawing. The fumes get into the air conditioning. We see the body in the freezer begin to move and become alive again. Now it's 4 p.m. Pacific time. We see a car pull into a gate at a very nice home. The colonel gets home and isn't appreciative of his dinner. He goes into his bar room and makes a check-in call. Back to the table, and he snaps on his wife when she asks him questions about finding the bodies. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, the group is heading back to pick up Freddie. Suicide snaps on Spider and almost wrecks them. They get to the medical supply center and they realize he's not off for 2 more hours. They decide to go play in the graveyard. They break in and it's a mess. The music's back on. Freddie wakes up and Frank is coughing big time. Freddie says he doesn't feel good. They realize the body is missing out of the barrel. Frank pukes as they head upstairs. Frank says we shouldn't tell Bert and he's going to spray deodorant all over. They hear a dog now and realize the dead dog is alive. Frank beats it with a crutch. They hear pounding. Now the cadaver is pounding on the freezer door. They lock themselves in the office. They realize the chemicals brought the bodies back to life. Frank calls Bert, not the police, because he's worried about the company. And he casually tells Bert they have a problem. All right, go ahead, Brian.
So I thought right off the bat, I thought it was very interesting how we're given like the exact time and date right at the start. That almost sets it up kind of like a documentary style. I mean, I know it's not, but that was an interesting choice. And right off the bat, we get introduced to James Cameron's Frank. Rest in peace. He passed away in 2018. He's definitely a staple of this franchise and a horror legend himself. I mean, he was in Frankenstein movies. And I think a few of these Return of the Living Dead sequels. And Clu Gulger's Bert, he's more known for like some westerns and stuff, but he got into the Feast franchise, which I actually haven't seen yet, but that came out in the early 2000s. And I'm gonna be honest, like you can definitely tell Frank's early acting background, like just in his over the top delivery of the lines he's given, it definitely doesn't seem natural. And this definitely sets the tone for the over the topness, over the top nature. Is that a word? The whole over the top nature of the movie for sure. But I think James Cameron kind of steals this first bit of the film here for me. And that's the thing with this movie. It's like serious 1 minute, then it's like it's fucking around. It's such a bizarre, like unique movie. And I'll tell you what, it's definitely one of the earliest meta takes on anything that I can remember.
Yes.
I do think it's cool how they established this isn't in the Night of the Living Dead universe, that it's different yet the same. Something impressive about that and doing it 10 years before really anybody else started doing it. Freddie kind of reminds me of us. Like if people may think you're stupid, but if someone told me there's real life zombies in the basement and Night of the Living Dead was based off of them, yes, please. I mean, I would go down there and see them too. And I laughed at him using fucking Windex to wipe the container off. It was so
the whole roll of paper towels, like
so unnecessary. By the way, I use the whole roll sometimes. I'm gonna admit, but it's still a little bit weird to even see him doing that. But then he hits it, and we get this like rocking '80s intro. Like, what is going on here? I did think it was a great effect on the skeleton basically melting. Apparently, they just used layers of wax and melted the zombie. And that whole glass cracking was just a happy accident. And I don't know. For some reason, did anybody else get Caddyshack vibes from this opening scene with Jonathan Terry's Colonel at his house? By the way, may recognize him from Halloween 3, by the way. But props to this movie, though, for its set pieces. They really look good. They look huge, especially with the cemetery. Like, this stuff impresses me since there's no CGI to kind of give it that grand scale that you expect nowadays. But let's spray some deodorant around here. And then he fucking beats a half dog. Not a whole dog, like a half dog with, I mean, This fucking movie is nuts. And at this point, I think I love it at this point. And I don't know. That's a question mark. I think I love it. I don't know. Go ahead.
It's the meta. It's the meta. You love the meta.
Maybe. Go ahead.
The original opening for John Russo's version was very different. It wasn't until Dan O'Bannon got involved that you have the script and like the screenplay that you have on screen now. The original opening scene was going to be a funeral of a little girl, and her dad had to pound a stake through the little girl's head in the coffin to make sure that she was dead, because they wanted to really drive home that the living dead.
Pardon me. I beg your pardon.
Yeah. They were still trying to stick to like the whole not meta, not horror comedy thing before Dan O'Bannon got involved. But anyway, so he rewrote the script to what we know it as today. I think it's better. I think that's a little...
It was different. It was a different version of the franchise. And that's one of the reasons that my mom loved it as much as she did, was because it was just something different. And she grew up on those kinds of classic horror movies, style movies. And this one, we watched it, 4 or 5 times a year for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It's definitely it's got a different vibe to it, but for good reason.
At the very beginning where it says based on true events, it's still like, is it really? It's in the 80s, so people are like, you can't Google it. So how do we know? I like that they say that they use the cadavers that they have for ballistic testing. Like, no, I'm pretty sure that's against a whole bunch of military laws. When he's talking about the barrels aren't going to break because they're made by the Military Corps of Engineers. Anybody who ever had military family knows that anything that says military grade on it just means it's from the lowest bidder. Promise you that.
Also, after he followed up with saying typical military fuck up. So he's on one hand saying that they're stupid, and on the other hand, this is great. You're contradicting yourself.
When Frank sprays the Lysol like it's going to do something, they actually had to get permission from Lysol for him to be able to spray that in the movie.
I wondered if they were sponsoring that.
Yep. I don't know if they sponsored, but they definitely had to get permission for it. And then the last thing that I have about this set of scenes is when they're in the office, there's like an eye chart in the background. And if you read it, it says, Bert is a slave driver and a cheap son of a bitch who is going bald too, ha ha.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's like this handwritten eye chart, but if you read it, that's what it says.
I noticed the eye chart, but I couldn't see what the small letters said. I knew it said Bert is or something. And I figured they were trashing the boss man. All right, back to the cemetery. Spider and Trash converse about dying, and she says the worst way would be a bunch of old men circling her, biting her, and eating her alive. Trash rips her clothes off and begins to dance naked with flares and music blaring. Bert is back and bitching at the guys and snaps on Frank about the repercussions of what could happen to him and the company. Bert says in that movie they had to destroy the brain. Freddy opens the door as Frank panics. The cadaver runs out and tackles Bert. They hold the body down and Bert slams a pickaxe into its skull. It doesn't kill it though. Bert saws its head off now, but the body still waltzes around the warehouse, knocking everything over. They tackle the cadaver again and tie it up. Freddy yells the movie lied about how to kill it. Bert looks out the window and says the crematorium is still open. Maybe we can go there. Bert asks for the bone saw. Suicide complains how he busts his ass for the group, and Trash says she likes it spooky as she flirts with him. He pushes her away. Kasey thinks she sees Freddy walking through the mortuary. Bert walks in on Ernie working on a cadaver, and Ernie asks if he wants coffee. He now explains rigor mortis. Bert asks how long they've been friends. 25 years, he says. He says he needs a huge favor. Bert's guys bring in the cadaver's body chopped into pieces. Bert says they're all rabid weasels. Ernie is hesitant, says take them to the pound. Ernie says it's cruel to burn animals alive. Ernie is very confused. Bert asks if he swears to keep a secret. He shows him the arm of the cadaver. It grabs Ernie's ankle and he falls to the ground. We got a long story to tell you. Chuck is flirting hard with Kasey, but she tells him to go choke a chicken. Tina gets the time from Spider and says she's going to find Freddy. He's about to get off work. She rings the doorbell and no answer. Ernie asks, "What's in it for me if I let you use the furnace?" Freddy and Frank starting not to look too well. Bert tells Ernie he can have whatever he wants as he cuts off the loose fabric on his pants. He says, "Let's take care of your problem." He cranks the furnace up and says bones burn easy, and the heart is the toughest thing to burn. They load the pieces in the oven. The smoke from the burning body gets into the air now. Thunder and lightning now as it begins to rain. The kids all grab their stuff and run to the car. They complain their skin burns like it's acid rain. The car is not starting now, and they're all pissed. We go under the ground and see the rain hitting the corpses. All right, go ahead, Brian.
So, Linnea Quigley's dance sequence, I, I don't think I would get much argument if I said that it's probably the most memorable part universally, by everyone in this movie. A funny fact about that, the first time she actually did the dance, one of the executives came to the set that day, and the producer freaked out and said, "You can't have pubic hair." What? So they put a mold on her crotch, so there's actually nothing at all there. So I guess that's what we get here. I guess technically it's not full frontal, but who the hell edited this? I mean, we go from that back to Frank and Bert like arguing about the corpses and letting the corpse out, and Frank for some reason not even using the pickaxe. It's just pure insanity. I do love though how they try to normalize zombie tropes and nothing works. Like, anybody catch the embalmer being named Ernie, by the way? So we have Bert and Ernie owning companies across the street from each other. Apparently Dan O'Bannon was asked about that and he said it was just a coincidence, but yeah, okay. Yeah, right, okay. And something about Ernie, I mean, you notice in the background some German and some Hitler memorabilia, but it's never really touched on besides that World War II German gun he had. On the DVD commentary, though, O'Bannon does mention that his backstory is that Ernie was intended to be an escaped Nazi in hiding. So I think Ernie is great, though. He's really down for whatever. True ride or die friend right there. He's just like, well, let's go fucking go in the parking lot and shoot him first. I mean, it's just, he's ride or die. Little fun fact about Kasey, Jules Shepard. O'Bannon actually met her at a strip club where she worked as a stripper. He initially wanted her in the role of Trash, but understandably, she was pretty fed up with being naked for work after having done stuff like Hollywood Hot Tubs and Christina just before this, where she was basically nude the entirety of the film. So she suggested actually auditioning for Kasey since she liked to party. And after this, though, Shepard kind of got typecast and went back to doing stuff like Party Camp and Hollywood Hot Tubs 2. So she's actually a writer now. Just a little fun fact there. And Nico brought up Spider and Suicide, and both of them actually being in Friday the 13th Part 5. And the actor that played Scuzz, Brian Peck, the only person that played in all three Return of the Living Dead movies. So that's a little something there, too. And lastly, and not that literally any of this even remotely resembles realistic. Honestly, it's borderline comedy, like I said, but could they have just chosen to have it like raining before the exact second of the smoke rising from the cremation chimney? Like, I mean, just come on, please. Anyway, go ahead.
That's what made it rain.
You want to go first, Case?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback off what you said there for a second at the beginning. You said it was interesting that they had date and time stamps kind of throughout the whole course of it. And that was something that I picked up on as well this most recent time I watched the movie. Looking at the clock in the back of the mortuary when they're like looking at the rabid weasels or whatever the hell they were calling it. And you can see the clock and they're trying so hard to keep that time frame accurate throughout the entirety. So I think that's why they jump from scene to scene, is to give some time in between. This is what's happening at which is funny, gotcha, Resurrection Cemetery, and then again back at the mortuary. So I think that's one of the things that caught my attention, kind of analyzing the film in a different fashion than I've ever done before, other than just kind of nitpicking at it, like, why did they put that in there? That's so dumb. The other thing that I noticed that kind of caught my attention was in the mortuary when they are initially talking about the rabid weasels, or not, were they in the mortuary or were they in the morgue? Which one was it?
They were in the embalming room.
Embalming room? Okay, the embalming room. When they're in the embalming room talking about it, the choice of gun, and that it was just like readily available for him. He just all of a sudden had it. I thought that was very odd, but I didn't know your fun fact about him having previously kind of been in that.
He tried to kill Bert with it when Bert walked
When he
in.
walked in initially with the headphones. Yeah, when he had the headphones on.
I just have a couple things about this set of scenes. This is actually the first movie ever to talk about zombies eating brains. So this
There you go.
set that standard for future horror movies, future zombie movies.
And pop culture, because everybody says brains.
Yep.
Bumper sticker that says that.
Yep. The song that Trash is dancing to in the cemetery, I freaking love that song. But she wasn't dancing to that song during filming. They actually switched it out to that song after the fact, and I think it was a good choice because it's, if you listen to it, it's catchy. But and then last thing I'll say in the set of scenes, if you look at the name on the cemetery and the funeral home is the Resurrection Cemetery. That's what it's called. So little foreshadowing there.
Foreshadowing to a pretty decent Halloween movie coming in the next few decades. Oh, never mind.
Decades, yeah.
Also, I wanted to point out, like, that shot where you follow the rainwater down with those like 1950s almost style effects. I really like that shot. It's iconic, I think, for this movie because Beetlejuice definitely rips that off like in a couple of years. They use that exact shot like 2 or 3 times too.
Yeah. In the cemetery, also they rented every available headstone and all that kind of like decor that they had there out of Hollywood. They rented all of it, and they ended up having to additionally make more as well
because Dan O'Bannon wanted the cemetery to look extremely full,
and it did.
Yeah, no, I think he really pulled it off. Yeah, it's a cool shot for sure.
Yeah, I really like that rain going into the ground shot as well. Bert thinks they're home free, and he thanks Ernie for his help. Freddy says he's really sick, and Frank says he is too. They tell Bert of the gas they breathe in when the canister leaked. Frank runs outside, throwing up, but they pull him back inside. Ernie calls for an ambulance. He tells them 2 men are poisoned. Kasey asks the group if they hear something. We get slow-mo shots through the graveyard, and we see the corpses emerging the graves and crawling. The convertible's roof leaks now. Tina walks through the warehouse, calling out for them to no answer. She goes into the basement now, still looking for Freddy. She sees the open canister, and she hears a noise and turns around, and a zombie chases after her. Brains, it says. Tina falls through the steps and hides in a closet. The zombie tries to use a chain and pulley to rip the door open. Suicide yells out for her, and they hear her cries. The zombie bites into Suicide's head. More brains, it says, as the group runs away. The paramedics show up to the funeral home. They examine Freddy and Frank, and they look terrible. Pale skin and orange tongues. They can't hear anything through their stethoscopes. No blood pressure and no pulse. Spider nails the door shut, and they run out the warehouse. They're back to the cemetery now, and they hear a loud howl. They see a skeleton climb out the grave, and all take off running. More corpses emerge from their graves. Trash's worst nightmare comes true as she's surrounded by zombies and attacked. The paramedics tell Frank and Freddy their vitals show that they're dead, but dead people aren't responsive. We hear banging at the door, and the group shows up to the funeral home. Spider tells Ernie it's dead people screaming. Chuck and Kasey hide back into the warehouse as zombies chase them. The paramedics go outside and hear the screaming. They get into the ambulance, and they turn the lights on, and the guy up front is swarmed by zombies, and the guy in the back is overtaken. Spider tells Bert about the corpses coming out the ground. Tina tells Bert there's one in this warehouse as he snaps. She says there's 100 of them out there. Kasey and Chuck get to the office to call the cops, but one dives through the window. Tina unites with Freddy, who looks terrible. All right, go ahead, Brian.
So this is the first time you really get to see the zombies, which you can tell they definitely put a lot of time and effort into most of them. So shout out to Tony Gardner and some others of parts of his team. Gardner actually went on to do the effects for Zombieland Double Tap. Love that movie. Hocus Pocus. I think Nico likes that one a little bit. And even Bad Grandpa. So, but apparently this wasn't an easy movie at all to do. There was apparently a lot of chaos on set with makeup and things like that. I mean, some of the zombies look great. Some of them look like awful fake skeletons. So I can understand if there was some hectic things going on there. We get the iconic Tar Man zombie here for the first time. That look has definitely become iconic through the years. And hey, if you're itching for a prop, they don't sponsor us, but you can. But Trick or Treat Studios has the Tarman zombie based off of William Stout's own artwork for order online right now, shipping April 22. That will date us moving forward, I'm sure. But anyway, bam, straight for the brains. I love that kill. That may be my favorite kill in the movie. Just how iconic it is. But again, like this is where it starts getting back into serious territory until the graveyard scene. And then I feel like I'm watching a Rocky Horror Picture Show or some shit. And we're about to get a comedic dance number. So again, like what the fuck's going on here? But I love the shot in the ambulance where they turn the light on or lights on, the headlights on, and all the zombies are standing there. That's probably my favorite shot in the entire movie. I thought that was very well done, and I wanted to point that out. And lastly, every time it flashes to Lena Quigley, I kept literally saying to myself, "Well, yep, your tits are out again." And then I was like, "Oh, are they out the entire movie?" I mean, but at least in this set of scenes, she does at least get to put on a vest. So, also. Did anyone else notice the Freddie and Tina names? I mean, I don't know this for sure, but Nightmare on Elm Street did come out 2 years before this. I'm just saying.
They actually did that with a few of the names. Bert and Ernie, Freddie and Tina, and then also the paramedics' names are Tom and Jerry.
Oh, nice.
So that actually was a themed thing.
Coincidence.
Yeah, right? Keeps happening. When it starts to rain and it's acid rain and everything, after Trash has taken all of her clothes off and they're running back to the car, she's all mad that she doesn't have any clothes on and it's burning, and she's like trying to pull everybody else's clothes off, like, bitch, you left your clothes in the cemetery. Don't take my shit because you're irresponsible and needed all this attention. When Tarman finds Tina in the basement and she's hiding in that like metal closet or whatever, I thought this was really interesting because I just wrote down, like, these are the smartest zombies ever.
Oh, yeah.
Not that in the 80s they didn't really have much to, like, compare against. Yeah, but
magically knew how to
open
up the door from, how long the barrel been missing for ages. And
yeah.
all of a sudden he knows how to use this, like, thing that's hooked up to the ceiling and he opens the door magically.
Yeah, runs the pulley with the chain perfectly. But Dan O'Bannon actually said he didn't want... Dan O'Bannon and John Russo, they did not want stupid zombies. Like, they wanted something that would make you scared of them, something that could think, something you wouldn't be able to beat easily. So there was actually thought behind that. When the paramedics are in the embalming room checking out Freddie and Frank, and they say, "What do you mean no blood pressure, no pulse?" That has been a running, like, one-liner in my family for 150 years. Like, if we don't say that quote once a week, and it's probably because we've seen this movie so many times, but just every time I see that, I laugh because it makes me think of my mom. She said it all the time.
Anytime somebody was sick, you'd have to take that stupid temperature thing under the tongue, and she'd be like, "What do you mean no blood pressure, no pulse? Your room temperature."
Yep. And then, of course, back to foreshadowing, Trash got exactly what she didn't want. And that's pretty much what I had for... I think these set of scenes.
All right, I got a quick question before I go on to the next one. This on my rewatch. When I saw Tarman, kind of reminded me of Jason in Part 7. Does the exposed spine and the kind of look, did that remind you of, or do you think maybe they drew a little inspiration from this? I mean, I didn't read that, but once I saw that exposed spine, I was like, I think Kane Hodder might be a fan of this movie. I'm just winging that. I don't know. It just made me think of it.
I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of movies took a lot from this. I mean, this is a very beloved film. I mean, by a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is. I mean, it's just, not my type, but a lot of people love that style, that whole dark comedy style.
I hate that movie.
Unless it's The Conjuring, Nico hates it.
Oh, no. Hey, I'm probably the nicest person on the show when it comes to movies. That's just a hater. All right, let's go to the next scene. All right, Ernie goes out to the ambulance and sees no one, and the door is wide open. He closes the door and sees a dwarf zombie eating a paramedic's brains. He shoots it and runs back inside. Ernie tells Bert they're all over the cars. Bert says we have to call the police, but the phone's not working. Zombies start to punch through the glass in the door, and they barricade it with a big dresser. The guys get weapons and hit the zombies as they try and break in. A zombie tells the dispatch to send more paramedics for them to eat. They get back to the embalming room, and Spider and Scuzz forces Bert to tell them what happened. Freddy now tells them his side effects and what's happening to him. They pull his shirt up, and he's got blood pooling up in his back. Rigor mortis is setting in. Freddy screams as Scuzz says he's turning into one of the zombies. We hear more paramedics show up. They exit their vehicle and are immediately attacked by the zombies. The zombies begin to knock the boards down, and they grab a hold of Scuzz, and he's bitten in his head and killed. Bert blocks the hole up, and Ernie stabs into the zombie and brings it into the embalming room to examine it. "You can hear me," she says. "Yes." She eats brains, not people. She says it hurts to be dead. She feels herself rot. Eating brains makes the pain go away. The three men walk out, and Spider asks how we kill those things. Bert says burn them, but there's 100 of those fuckers. Trash comes back to life, and we see a homeless man pushing a cart. He looks up and sees Trash walking towards him, and she attacks him, killing him. The police station gets calls over the missing ambulances. Chuck and Kasey are talking, wondering if they will come rescue them. Bert says we might have to lock Freddie and Frank up to be safe. Ernie says the chapel. The two men scream in agony as they are carried into the chapel. They set them down softly on the carpet. Tina says she's not leaving Freddie. Ernie, Bert, and Spider leave her with them. In the next few scenes are the ending. Go ahead, Brian.
And maybe it's the soundtrack that makes it so cheesy right here, especially during the scene where they're trying to reinforce the funeral home. And I mean, without that, it more resembles Night of the Living Dead. And maybe that's why O'Bannon made the choice with that to kind of separate it. I don't know. But shout out to those effects with the zombie eating that ambulance driver's head. But then we get what you were talking about earlier, Joe, with the smart zombies. I mean, the dude gets on the fucking radio and says, "Send more paramedics." I was like, what? I mean, I just full of good looking zombies, but then that woman corpse that they have like tied up, hell, for 85, that looks pretty good, but having the conversation, this whole set of scenes is really where the movie kind of starts to lose me. And I don't really understand what's happening here. Like, besides a cool shot of the trash coming back out of the mud, what did they take the time to bury her too? I mean, and she's back naked again, but like what's going on? Like, she's got this makeover too, like not like a disgusting zombie with torn flesh. Like, it's a miracle. I don't know. It's what the fuck's going on in this movie? I don't even know. And this is as good a time as any, I guess, to tell you that Dan O'Bannon kind of claims he was surprised at how many women were in the initial audience, and joked if he'd had such a large female following, he would have shown Freddie naked as well. So.
Hey-oh. You want to go first, Case?
Yeah. So in this set of scenes, definitely the scenes where you see the zombies starting to eat the brains, what kind of stuck out to me is the fact that they never finish eating the brains. They take like one or two bites and then move on and like run away to a new person. But the dead person is still sitting there eating or like dying, and then all of a sudden becomes a zombie. I do love the scene where they do send more paramedics. I thought that was very creative and kind of funny to me. I thought it was just a different twist on a series of this kind of a movie. You know, why would zombies all of a sudden know how to talk? Same thing with why would, a canned zombie all of a sudden know how to operate a door and a pulley system? Just the strangest little things that made it a little bit and more entertaining for me to watch. When they do have the lady kind of chained to the table, this is one of the scenes that is kind of funny for us from an outside perspective. I didn't know this until recently. There was a bunch of people underneath the table operating her arms and her head and the spine, trying to move it as they had that. It was in like an animatronic stage. It wasn't like you said, CGI. It wasn't back in the day. So I thought that was pretty interesting that they had like 4 or 5 people underneath the table trying to operate it all at the same time. And she had just the most awful looking boobs. I wish they could have made those looking a little bit better, maybe, but they were just some nasty ass.
Case, she's decomposing.
Oh.
They were hucky. And then the spinal fluid definitely was an interesting side of it for me. The fact that she's still leaking spinal fluid after how many years she was probably dead?
Lord knows. That was a good touch, though. I'm like, ew. So let me just rewind a little here. I took my original notes here back in September, pre-COVID, when we were gonna originally do this, and I'm looking at my notes trying to decode what I was talking about for this scene. All I wrote down was midget zombie. I'm like, what did I mean? No idea. So I have during the rewatch, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a midget zombie actually eating one of the paramedics. Okay, that makes sense. I'm just like, what did I write? When you see the first skeleton pop up through the dirt, A lot of people don't know this. That's an actual real human skeleton that they had to run animatronics through the spinal cord, because obviously there's no mass to hide the animatronics. So, but it was a real human skeleton. They bought it from a not a medical supply facility, but like a university or something like that.
So something that does medical, like scientific research or whatever.
And then like when they're kind of like what you were talking about, Brian, when they're boarding up the funeral home, and there's like this 80s montage music, like John Cusack's gonna come out of the background. Like, I get it, it's horror comedy, but what are we doing? And the song in the background, if you listen to it, it talks about like the living dead and stuff. And then so when they're back in the embalming room, and Scuzz pulls a switchblade on Ernie. Like, does anybody else think that the switchblade is just like the unofficial weapon of the 80s, and everybody has them?
Especially if you're like a punk rocker guy, you know. Yeah, absolutely. Switchblade.
Everybody's got a switchblade.
It like came back from the 50s, like with the greasers. The greasers had it.
Yes. And then last thing I had for this set of scenes is the pipe that Bert has when he's like beating off all the zombies. Beating the zombies off with the pipe.
Pause.
None of it sounds good. When he's hitting the zombies. Originally it was a steel pipe, but I guess there was some not bad blood, but a little heat between Dan O'Bannon and Bert. They took the metal pipe from him and replaced it with a rubber one because they thought he was really going to hit somebody and just like blow up. Apparently he had a little bit of a temper.
Nice.
Goodness.
Him and get along famously.
The old switcheroo.
All right, y'all, here's the ending. 2 cops find the ambulances as they touch base with dispatch. They exit the police car and investigate. They find the dead paramedic. Then the 2 men are overrun by zombies, and the zombie radios for more cops. Ernie suggests nitric acid to combat them. Back to the chapel, and Freddy and Frank are not having a good time. Freddy says he can finally see, and he goes to attack Tina. Live brains. Frank sneaks out as Bert fights off Freddy. Ernie throws the acid all over him. Back to the embalming room, and the zombie lady yells out, "Brains, brains." They said they got to make a run for the cars. We can't stay here anymore. Ernie's foot is broke from the bench falling on it. Bert and Spider make a run for the police car, fighting the zombies off. They make it into the car and begin to drive towards the funeral home. They were swarmed and have to abandon them. They drive through the fence of the graveyard, but there is an army of zombies in the street. Bert crashes the car, and he and Spider make it into his warehouse with Chuck and Kasey. Freddy is on a mission to find Tina. Tina and Ernie make it into the roof. The furnace turns on. Frank takes his wedding ring off. He kneels in front of it and asks for forgiveness. He climbs into the oven, killing himself. Now we see helicopters and more cops arrive, but they're all overrun by a bunch of zombies. The helicopter tells them anyone wishing to surrender make it to the perimeter. Bert says they're getting to the basement to get to that phone. He's going to knock its block off. We see Freddy trying to get into the roof with them. Freddy wants to eat her brain. Spider opens the door to the basement, and Bert knocks its head off with a baseball bat. They make it into the basement. Bert calls the police, and Bert tells them the place is full of rabid people. The cops at the barricade now see all the zombies running towards them and begin attacking them. Bert now calls the army. They connect to the colonel, and he and Bert talk, and the colonel takes notes on the events that happened. Colonel goes to his phone and tells them they found the lost Easter eggs. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, and the eggs have hatched. A man operating a tank launches a missile, and we see Freddy break into the roof, and then a giant explosion. 5:01 a.m. Eastern Time. Spectacular results, less than 4,000 dead. All should be back to normal by morning, the colonel says, as we see more slow motion shots and more skeletons emerge from the graves. All right, Brian, that's the ending. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was interesting. I love the scene with the 2 cops right up until we get Sid more cops again. I was just like, really? I mean, but the effects with Freddy dying, finally, I think Matthews does a tremendous job. Also, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but on the back of Freddy's jacket in the theatrical version, the words "fuck you" are displayed. But and after realizing that the shot couldn't be used in case it was ever shown on TV, which used to be an issue, I guess. But a second jacket was made that says "television version" and can be seen in the TV version of that movie. I thought that was funny. That's a nice little touch. And Ernie, you dumb motherfucker. Like, he's trying to nail shut the doors as Freddy's busting through the middle of them. Like, what? And then he breaks his foot doing what? Like, I was like, what is going on? That and the brains corpse on the table cracked me up because she was just like, brains. And like, it got a little bit funny, a little bit actually there. And, Tom talked about this a little bit in his interview with us and how they wanted him to come back for part 2. And he was like, what? I'm dead. But this whole scene with Frank and the cremation oven, that was actually James Cameron's own idea. Understandably, he didn't want to be full zombie in the LA rain. I get that. That's totally understandable. And it was his move to take the wedding ring off too. So I think he did a good job. Now the ending, I'm a fan of, except for the artillery specialist using hot dog for the H in phonetic alphabet. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Hot dog is the H? Okay. All right.
All 3 letters were wrong. None of them were right.
But the hot dog is the one that stood out to me.
It's a little dramatic, yeah.
And then we get the same recycled shot of that whole CVS looking skeleton that we got earlier. And admittedly, I haven't seen the others. So how does this continue? Like, how does this continue with Tom Matthews and them coming back? And they've blown up this entire town. Like, have you guys seen the sequels?
Yes. I don't remember like the continuity. Continuity?
Wow, continuity?
That's the word, yes.
No, I don't remember either.
I don't remember.
Anyway, go ahead.
So the send more cops thing definitely was comedic to me. It was hilarious. I do love the fact that the zombies let the cops get out of the car, wait long enough to investigate, so they were far enough away from the ambulance, or from the cop car to the ambulance, that they could get bombarded. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then the next kind of switch over was, knock the block off. That was definitely a hilarious scene to me, just because they sawed the head off of the first one. Why do we think that's going to help with the second zombie? Not a clue why they decided that was a good idea. Maybe just to kind of fix it. But then there was a whole nother body in the basement that we've seen them come back at this point. How do you know this one's not going to come back? But they didn't seem to think about that. And not one person in that whole scene is watching the body that's laying on the floor, which was suicide, I believe. And they're just focused on just the phone call. And it was just a frustrating scene for me to watch. I was like, you guys have been worried about this the whole time, but aren't paying attention to the one guy behind you?
You're locked in a room with.
Right.
And then the whole ending definitely had a Resident Evil feel for me. That's kind of how I feel like it ended, but then we're going to bring it back because everyone here is a moron and didn't listen to the person that just told them what happened.
Good point.
So Brian pretty much said everything I was going to say, so I'm not going to repeat it, but a couple things. The half corpse on the table. So when it was originally created by Tom Gardner, he did not want the nipple shot. He actually had it like a nightgown. And apparently there was a lot of arguing back and forth. And we ended up with nipples. So
why not?
Well, I mean, there was a big question about like, is it going to change the ratings? She's not a real person. This whole thing. So, Frank's death. I really like Frank's death. And I like that he came up with it and took the wedding ring off and hung it on the little thing. I thought that was a good touch. When Colonel Glover gets called and they wake up out of bed and Mrs. Glover's from the 40s because she's sleeping with a robe on. You see the whole time she's on the phone, and you can see it just pisses her off that somebody like has the audacity to call them in the middle of the night. Like, she's just like, who could be calling this late? Like, there's not an actual emergency on the line, but
I'm surprised they didn't have twin beds. So yeah, I completely agree. It was definitely from the 50s.
Well, he treated her like shit. So
he was an ass.
That's a story for another day. But I like that they called them the Easter eggs, and when he said, "Well, it would be good news, but they hatched." And when he's talking about how they had this contingency plan, and they're just gonna bomb the whole city. The end.
I mean, you can't really do a whole lot else, so I'm kind of glad they went that route.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Any more final thoughts on the ending before we just jump into some social media comments and questions? All right. On Twitter, blood donor of the show, Edwin Hernandez Gun, he commented that he loves this movie and the second one. So I guess, Brian, we do need to at least check the second one out. On Facebook, Dennis Kennedy, he commented, "Great movie. This is one of my go-to horror films." He also commented, "This is a very good one to give someone who's new to horror." I'd probably agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe, congratulations. You finally picked a movie that Kevin Potoff likes. He hates everything else we've done recently.
You're the only one.
And he
out of 180. Yes.
and I quote, "Fucking finally, damn fine classic movie."
He cracks my ass up.
Dude, he is such a hater. Shout out to Kevin. And Shan, another huge fan of the show. We really appreciate her. This is a fun one. Can't wait to hear it. Great one to pick, Joe. So that's all the social media comments we have. You ready to jump into fun facts? I've only got a few of them.
Sure, I've only got 2.
Okay. I don't think this one was said, but some of the zombie extras were paid bonus to eat real calf brains in the film. Dan O'Bannon didn't want the actors to do anything he wasn't willing to do and ate some raw calf brains first in front of them to show that he wouldn't ask them to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. Appreciate the commitment.
Yeah.
Miguel A. Nunez Jr. was homeless when he was cast in this movie. I think that's a nice story of a come up for him.
Wow.
Because then he was in Friday the 13th Part 5, I think, in the exact same year.
Right.
And then just to follow up with Joe's comment about getting approval from Lysol, Lysol said they liked the idea that Lysol would kill any conceivable odor. So even zombie smell, Lysol can kill it.
I only have 2. The according to recently released book, The Complete History of the Return of the Living Dead, the Simpsons creator Matt Groening actually came up with the tagline, "They're hungry and they're not vegetarians," which appears in some of the trailers. Another tagline he came up with was, "First they want to meet you, then they want to eat you." That was rejected by the studio, apparently. And lastly, a young George Clooney visited the set as he was then roommate of Tom Matthews. I would have asked him about that if I'd have known about that at the time we did that interview.
Who is George Clooney? I've never heard of that guy.
No, I'm either. A nobody. He's not good looking either.
No, he's not. Joe, Kasey, y'all got any fun facts?
I got one more. Dan O'Bannon did an interview before he passed away. Rest in peace. He said that Hitchcock was sleeping in his trailer during the making of Psycho, and he wanted to be like Hitchcock, so he spent a lot of time sleeping in his trailer, according to this interview.
Okay.
Because he wanted to be like Hitchcock. Dream big.
Yeah, shoot for the stars.
Uh-huh.
Since Organic Mike's not here tonight, I'll do the box office for him.
Money Mike.
The budget was estimated $4 million according to IMDb, and the gross was $14,237,880.
Wow. Okay.
So, $10 million profit, that's nothing to scoff at, especially in 85.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. It's time. Favorite kill, least favorite kill in the rating. Joe,
I have one
Kasey.
more fun fact. I lied. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's too late now. We're moving. I'm just kidding.
Tom Matthews went and pierced his ear for this role because that's what his character description was in the script, because he didn't know that you could have a fake one. So he for real pierced his ear.
Wow. Something else I wish I would have asked him about.
Yep. Real commitment. All right. Sorry, Nico. Go ahead. What were you going to...
No, you're good. You're good. Shout out to Tom Matthews, friend of the show. Check out the interview at Where to Brian.
Don'tGoOutThere.com.
That's right. No, it's rating. Favorite kill, least favorite kill. Joe, Kasey, I want to go first or last? Ricky Bobby style.
Last.
All right, I'll just go first. Then I'll read Dustin's. How about that, Brian? Then you can go.
Sounds good.
All right, my favorite kill, I chose Suicide. Love the Tar Man biting his head. I just thought it was a good little pop. I wish we would have got more Tar Man in this movie, honestly. Least favorite kill, I chose Trash, Linnea Quigley, Surrounded and Killed. I mean, there was a lot of Surrounded and Killed movies, but she's a legend, and I just picked her. All right, my little summary. I acknowledge this as a classic and a horror fan's favorite. However, I just think it's okay. Not a big fan of the zombie genre of horror, and this movie is pretty damn cheesy. Some of the cheese is okay, though. Some of the effects look good, some not so much. The kills aren't great either. I'm not a big fan of that. I already said this earlier, but as a big Friday the 13th franchise fan, I love seeing Tom Matthews and Miguel Nunez Jr. Great music throughout the flick. It's not terrible, but it's just not personally my cup of tea. I gave it a 5.5. And let me pull up Dustin's rating, and I'll read his off real quick. He said, I gave it a 5.25. This type of intentionally cheesy 80s horror annoys me unless executed flawlessly, and this one just wasn't. It didn't work for me. It had some decent laughs, and it has the great Tom Matthews, but it's on my I won't intentionally watch it again list. Sorry, Joe. Still love you. You're one of my favorite listeners.
So my favorite kill, I've already said it was suicide as well. I thought it was just one of those iconic kills. My least favorite kill, I think I picked the hobo. You know, I think he was killed by trash, the zombie trash. But that was at the moment where I was like, what the fuck is going on? What's and so I don't know, maybe I missed it. I don't know, but that's what I picked for my least favorite kill. As far as my rating goes, I actually like a lot of this movie. It's fun. I can definitely see how you could sit down and have some fun with it. I definitely want to kind of catch the second one at some point and make it a priority to watch that, just because Tom Matthews is back, and I kind of want to see what they did with this. I kind of want to see where they went with it. I actually gave it a 5.75 as well, just because I like about half the movie, and the other half kind of goes a little bit too cheese for me. And so 5.75, that's not bad. Go ahead.
My least favorite kill was also suicide, which I think is hilarious because that was actually one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, as well as a lot of everybody's favorite kill. But for me, it was just, I don't know. I didn't like it. Wasn't that good to me. But I'd had a really high standard up for movie kills at this point when I started watching this. I grew up from the age of 4 watching horror movies with these crazy people ahead of me.
Shout out to mom.
Shout out to mom and my brothers and my dad and my sister for teaching me the ropes young, growing up with the scariest of the scariest. This one just to me didn't seem that awesome, but I get it for its time. It was probably very iconic.
Its time. She was born in the 90s. Unbelievable.
But okay, I've watched quite a few movies over the decades that I've
She's
been
the
alive.
baby of the family.
My favorite kill was trash, just because it was so much foreshadowing. You kind of already knew ahead of time that that's really what was going to happen to her, just because she was such a horrible character in the film. Not that her acting or anything was like that, but I didn't like her character. She frustrated me, and she just is kind of a moron.
Y'all ain't never get Lene on this show.
I didn't like the character. I didn't know what to say. I didn't like her. So that was where I came from. For my rating, I'm rating it an 8 out of 10 on my scale, just because it means a lot to me. This movie is so much fun to watch. It's not necessarily a classic, scary movie, but I also grew up on scary movies. So this one, for me, the comedic relief was awesome, which is where I gave the 8 out of 10.
Okay.
All right. My favorite kill was Frank. Again, just because I like that it was his idea. He didn't want to turn into a zombie. I love the fact that he took his wedding ring off. That was my favorite one. My least favorite was suicide also, but only because I think he deserves some more time on screen. Like he got killed off so early for being the baddest, of the friends. And he's 6'7" in real life. He's just this huge dude, and then he's the first one to get killed off. I'm he deserves
take the alpha out early. Jail rules.
They yeah, they sure did. Just because I thought he deserved a little more time on screen. I rated it an 8 out of 10 also, because I like that it's, kind of a horror comedy. I like that it wasn't the first of its kind to do it, but it was, very early in this kind of mixed genre, the little bit of meta.
I would definitely argue the most popular one to do it if it wasn't the first. And
yeah,
like
definitely.
I think Chainsaw 2 definitely saw how well it did and took some note from it for sure.
Yeah, ugh. There were some others. But yeah, it was. I didn't like it either.
I agree.
To be honest with you, we spent the whole time in the radio station. No, anyway. But yeah, I like that it was kind of the first. You get a little glimpse of meta. Nobody did that in '85, anyways. Plus, this one, holds a special place in our heart. So it always comes back to the nostalgia with me. Every time I'm on this show, I'm I just like this movie because we watched it a lot.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Our nostalgia is a big part of the viewing experience.
That's true.
with the 5 ratings that we had, it came out to a 6.5, and IMDb is at 7.3 with 58,833 reviews. So we're pretty close, I would say, to IMDb. Not too far away.
What do they know?
Yeah, what do they know?
Oh, and before we get off of here, I wanted to say Linnea Quigley and Beverly Randolph and Jewel Shepard, call Mike sometime.
I was waiting for it.
Oh, mileage Mike. Any more final thoughts on Return of the Living Dead for your shout out to the blood donors? Our camp level reoccurring are Clayton J, Nina, Michelle Mirza, Andrew Ferguson, Carrie Adams, the Horror Movie Crew podcast, Alex Seligson, and a new blood donor is Eric Doolittle. Camp counselor reoccurring, Hunter Nelson, Karen, Shan Petrusevich, Dennis Kennedy, Edwin Hernandez Gunn, and Joe Larson. Who is that, Brian? I'm not sure who that is. Our legendary blood donors are, we just finished her review, Joe Swinford. We just finished her legendary blood donor review, Joe Swinford. And with Missy Hutchinson Wall, looking forward to Tourist Trap, which also has Linnea Quigley in it. Fun fact. And our final girl donor. No, I think she's just a mannequin or something in it. I think that's what it said. But hey, it just sounds good when we reach out. Hey, we're about to review Tourist Trap. We've done Silent Night, Deadly Night. You know, we're reviewing your stuff. Now come on the show.
Peek behind the curtain. I've already tried to hit her up and got ghosted.
All right, I'm about to dive in the DMs and on Instagram. I'm coming. Final girl donor is Danny C. Naps. Looking forward to her review in February. Just want to thank all our blood donors. Like I said tonight and previous episodes, you can do a podcast for free, but you won't do a very good one. I don't think it takes money, and
true.
We really appreciate all the fans and listeners who help support us financially to pay for the hosting, pay for our recording platform, pay for our website. You know, I mean, without you, this would be a lot harder on us. So y'all take a big burden off of us. We really appreciate all of our fans and our blood donors who help us out. We're a team and a unit, I would say. Any more final thoughts before we get out of here? Joe, Kasey, really appreciate y'all. Y'all are awesome.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for coming on, for your support, for everything. Please come back.
For those of us who don't know, how do we become a blood donor?
Go ahead, Brian. This is all you right here.
This is where you shine.
Just visit don'tgooutthere.com and you click on donate.
Well, I'm not, and I had just written down because this was so much fun, and I love listening to your guys' podcasts, and everything that I do, I kind of do, whether I love it or hate it. If I don't like it, I won't do it. You know, I just won't. So this is one of the things that I find very entertaining. It's fun to do. And my original thought with Joe, I call her Rosie, but Joe, was to do my Bloody Valentine. And I'd heard that was one that hadn't been done on the show before. So I was thinking maybe making a donation and getting my own vote on the movie.
Getting you a solo show.
Yeah, time out. The new one or the old one?
The new one with Jensen Ackles.
Oh, I actually like that movie. It's pretty decent.
Yeah, he's very tall and very funny.
Well, yeah, let's come back on. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll make time. I mean, the next couple of months are booming, but fuck it, we'll make time.
Valentine's Day, man.
We need to do a bonus. I mean, I'm just all right. Anywho, let's get out of here. Joe, Kasey, appreciate y'all. Thank you to all of our blood donors, and y'all have a good one. Happy New Year.
See ya. Bye.
Just want to remind everybody.